If you ever see me stammering or reading slow or what, it's because I'm not wearing my reading glasses, okay? So I'm really trying to squint and read this. And that's what it says. So, legal for a SPED student who did not qualify for life skills to receive resource minutes in a life skills classroom. Now, a couple things to unwrap here. First and foremost, all of our children's IEPs are individualized. So therefore, if there's a life skills classroom, then that looks like that's arbitrary and it's uniform, all right? For a child that has an individualized plan with individualized needs, whose diagnostic realities manifest in a very different way, that denotes an individualized education plan with goals that are unique and for your particular child, and there's resources over here that happen to be in what they call a life skills class, then, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to have access to the life skills class. But schools do stupid stuff all the time. They have a life skills class, they have a behavior skills class, and they have a functional class, and they have this class, and they have a happy, joy class. I don't care what they call these locations. I really don't care. And there's not enough information in your scenario to really understand why they're calling it a life skills class. Is it a nice way of saying this is where our low functioning students are? Because we want to be politically correct and not offend people, because that's what I just learned in another meeting where, they were fine with the child being there until they weren't fine with the child being there because the child had some behavioral concerns and didn't have any cognitive dysfunction or deficits. So it wasn't until they decided they didn't want him there. He was fine being there until just a couple weeks ago when we had the meeting. And now all of a sudden they were like, oh, well, our life skills class is for kids severely impacted by their disability. And so you see, it's amazing what schools will do when it meets their needs. So, but they tend to be inflexible when it doesn't because they want to pigeonhole a lot of schools. Not all of them. They want to pigeonhole our kids into these locations, pounding square pegs into round hole. And so it's our job as parents to sit there and be able to ask sufficient questions, peel back the onion and investigate, to sit there and say, well, what is it about these classes? What is it that makes it special? Why can't my child receive the services here? Is it because the class is designed for more severely impacted kids or moderately impacted kids, and my child doesn't meet those requirements? I mean, get them off of the political correctness track so you can have a logical conversation about why these classrooms are named these certain things like happy, joy class. Okay? And, you're sitting there going, well, I want my kid to be in happy. Well, actually, it's the miserable environment, but we can't call it that because, we have a door over here that doesn't have a doorknob on the inside where we throw these kids. But we wanted to call it the happy, joy class in order to throw you off of the scent that it's really the nasty hellhole. So whatever they call a classroom and whatever they declare a curriculum to be, it's our job as parents and advocates to ask the additional questions, follow-up questions to the follow-up question in order to get the responses and answers we need to make decisions as participants in this process. So many of the problems in this process can be solved by asking those questions. So let's go back to the rest of it. If your child has needs in functional and independent living skills and has an IEP, then at that point, the team should consider that. Now, can it be taught by somebody else? Of course, but do they have the qualifications to do that? It doesn't necessarily have to be in a specific class with a specific name. Our children are served across 4 base educational performance areas, okay? Academics, of course, which is what schools over-focus on, and they tend to diminish the other 3 areas: communication, social emotional development, functional independent living skills. So if your child, let's say, qualifies under other health impairment for ADHD, but yet has fine gross motor deficits, eating deficits, independent living skills deficits, things of that nature that would go across those functional and independent living areas, then at that point, yes, regardless of the impact of the ADHD on academics and maybe communication, if the team hasn't considered the deficits and how they're impacting your child in functional independent living, then absolutely that should be considered. They don't have to qualify, and I'm seeing more parents writing the word qualify. They don't have to qualify. Your child already has an IEP, so they don't have to re-qualify for speech language. They don't have to re-qualify for OT. They don't have to re-qualify for goals in specific areas. It just needs to be considered by the IEP team as to whether or not there's an educational impact, a negative educational impact across your child's educational performance areas that I just named: academic, social emotional, communication, functional independent living skills. And then when they turn 14 or ninth grade, depending on the state, it could be 16. There's a little leeway there. Transition skills then get brought into the mix as they edge toward 18 or 21 when they get a regular credits-based diploma, or they age out. So there's a lot of analysis that goes in. How does your child's disability manifest? Okay, not necessarily what their eligibility category is. How does it manifest? Where are the deficit areas? How does it impact them across their educational performance areas that I just named? Their educational performance areas, which include those things. And at that point, it's not about qualification, it's about need. It's about identifying that. Now, how do you identify that? Well, so with sufficient evaluations and assessments and observation. That brings us to being able to develop good goals, having present levels of performance. Then that brings us to be able to develop proper service minutes, instructional methodology. What instructional approaches is conducive to your child's manner of learning? That's how you develop a good IEP. But having to qualify, that's not the standard, okay? Once your child has an IEP, that is not the standard. Hope that answered your question.